Comic Boom.
Hey guys, Comic Boom here with my top 10 most disappointing DC titles for 2019. Now, why am I doing a top 10 most disappointing titles for DC in 2019? Partly because I'm shocked that there's actually that many titles that DC put out this past year that I'm very, very disappointed in. I think it was a rough year for DC. And I say disappointing because it's not that some of these titles weren't, I'm not going to say that they were horrible, but they were just disappointing. At a minimum, they were underwhelming. It doesn't mean they can't pick up. Some of them are basically one-shots, and I'll get to that. But in any event, I wanted to just do a quick rundown because it's always fun to sort of look at the past year and sort of put it in perspective. So for me, coming in at number 10 for my number 10 on the list of most disappointing DC titles in 2019, number 10 is The Commissioner. Year of the Villain, The Infected, The Commissioner. Now, in actual fact, I chose this because number one, it's a terrible issue. It's not even that it's badly written. Paul Jenkins did the script, Jack Herbert did the art. But unfortunately, the reason why it's not very good is that it's a prime example of why Year of the Villain as a whole is a huge disappointment for me, for DC, for the entire year. This Year of the Villain was really year of the most underwhelming stories that DC's put out in, I would have to say, probably the last 5 years. This has been a really rough year for DC, particularly with Bendis coming. We'll get into Bendis in a moment, but combined with the abject disappointment and failure of Bendis, the Year of the Villain was so underwhelming, wasn't it? And it was a very directionless event, and it's still going on. Unfortunately, DC's not ending it. It's still going to bleed into April of 2020. So the Year of the Villain is bleeding into, we got the destruction, we got the Snyder's he's not finished his Justice League run. It ends with 39, but it ends with Perpetua winning and Lex Luthor going on and fighting the Batman Who Laughs. So the Batman Who Laughs isn't gone away yet, so we still got to deal with that. This is just, it hasn't been very exciting writing. Has it been bad writing? Well, I won't say it's bad. It's just very, very underwhelming, very unexciting, very uninspired, very unoriginal. It's not particularly creative. They're at a creative low point right now, DC, and that's just how it feels. And The Commissioner's here, this is just a badly written comic. Because it has, again, I contradicted myself. I said it was badly written. It's not that it's badly written, but there's no point to it. Commissioner Gordon is just struggling with a dark side. And this comic book doesn't have a reason to exist. The event itself, Year of the Villain, doesn't have a reason to exist. Because we already have villains in the DC universe. If you're going to have a Year of the Villain, what's going to make it different? It has to be more than just Lex Luthor going around giving offers and gifts to a bunch of villains, and then they take these gifts and they don't do anything interesting. That's the problem. It's just not interesting. It's just been very, very dull. That's it in a nutshell. And it's epitomized by The Commissioner here, which really, what a waste. At least it was only $3.99, but even that was overpriced. Coming in at number 9 on the most disappointing titles of DC in 2019, The Inferior 5. Why this comic book exists, I don't know. This started off as a 12-issue series, and the sales were so bad on it, they cut it down to 6 issues. It's now only 6 issues long, as opposed to initially it was planned to be 12. And Jeff Lemire and Keith Giffen are the writers on this. So, Jeff Lemire is a very prolific writer in particular. And, of course, Keith Giffen, I don't think he's written anything. I've never enjoyed anything written by Keith Giffen for, I think it's well over 2 decades, to be blunt. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. I don't know. I think this maybe suffers from the curse of Keith Giffen, but I don't know what the point of this is. I've read this. This has a backup featuring the Peacemaker, and this has to do. It centers around the events following the Invasion, which is an old DC event that took place in the 90s, and I don't understand it. The art is just. The art leaves much to be desired, but it's an acquired taste. I mean, Keith Giffen does the pencils. I can even get in with the art, but it deals with the Dominators coming in, to it looks like a dilapidated Earth or a dystopian future Earth where after an invasion there's another invasion coming. I don't understand it. I don't know the point of it. What's the point of doing this? It doesn't fit into any of the continuity of the DC universe. Now, DC right now is a mess of continuity between the Justice League, between the fallout of Doomsday Clock, the fallout of Justice League, the multiverse healing itself, all of the multiverse and the dark multiverse as well, infecting the mainstream multiverse. Everything's in a state of flux, but where this fits in, I have no idea. It doesn't matter. I'm going to complete it. I have to complete the series because I'm a completionist. But wow, this is just... This is laughable. This is really this is as bad as this is as a story. It's yeah. I'll just leave it at that. I don't have much nice to say about it other than the fact that give this a mercy kill. 6 issues. If they didn't print issues 5 and 6 because it's on issue 4, if 5 and 6 never came out, nobody would notice. Coming in at number 8 of the most disappointing DC titles of 2019. Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. If you would have told me that Matt Fraction, the guy that wrote Hawkeye, was going to do this bad a job on Jimmy Olsen, I would have told you were crazy. But this is absolutely... He took Jimmy Olsen... You know, it's funny. Here's the difference between my expectation and what the reality was. The difference between theory and reality. You know, there's a lot of jokes on the difference between theory and reality. Let me tell you what my theory was for what he was going to do with Jimmy Olsen. I actually thought he was going to take Jimmy Olsen seriously. I did. I know it's crazy. It's stupid. I thought he was going to try to take Jimmy Olsen seriously, and while he was going to put some humor in the comic, but he was going to treat the character with respect. And he was going to make the character more mature, more adventurous, maybe give him a love interest, just give him a little bit more, make him more respectable, and make it more believable that this idiot called Jimmy Olsen could in any way, shape, or form be Superman's best friend. And man, oh man, unfortunately, all Matt Fraction did is he doubled down on Jimmy Olsen's abject stupidity. He's portrayed like a moron. He acts like a moron. He's always, it's not just that he's getting into trouble. You expect the reason why Jimmy Olsen was always getting into trouble, I thought in my heart of hearts, I thought it was because Jimmy Olsen had good reporter's instincts, but he's not. Jimmy Olsen is an idiot. And if you want proof that he's an idiot, just pick up Matt Fraction's Jimmy Olsen. The other thing is that Matt Fraction tries to be funny, and it can be funny at times. And the purpose of the story, just so you know, because I am getting it, it's at issue 6. It's basically linking Jimmy Olsen's family history with the history of Lex Luthor. Because back at the beginnings when Metropolis first formed, Jimmy Olsen's great-great-great-great-grandfather, Ebediah, or whatever his name was there, Ebediah Olsen, maybe I'm making that up, doesn't matter. You know, his great-great-grandfathers had a rivalry with Lex Luthor's great-great-great-granddad over power in Metropolis, and it was, you know, good versus bad, and ultimately the Luthors won, and that past is sort of linked to the future. So there is an overarching narrative here. So Matt Fraction, he's good at establishing an overarching narrative. Unfortunately, he jumps around and he breaks it up by interplaying and juxtaposing all the actions and breaking up all the sequences with references to Silver Age homages, which just don't work, and they just take me right out of the story. I wanted this to be a Jimmy Olsen for the 21st century, that maybe kept a little bit of his zaniness and craziness and awkwardness, but gave him a little bit more of respect, but not literally drowning him in the foolishness of the Silver Age, which quite frankly just doesn't work. And anyways, that's why I'm very disappointed with it. Number 7 for my most disappointing comic book series of 2019 has to be Superman. Wow, what a disappointment. Bendis is coming. Remember that? Bendis is coming. Well, guess what? Bendis is coming, you know, and I don't think anyone cares. It's like, meh, you know? It's like Bendis is in the living room and people just go into the kitchen to have supper and leave him in the living room by himself, sitting on the couch, you know, sipping Kool-Aid. And, you know, it's just, he's got no company. and he doesn't play well with others. Bendis doesn't care what other people think. He doesn't link well with others. He doesn't care about DC continuity. He doesn't care what other writers are doing in other titles. He certainly doesn't understand the dialogue. His dialogue is the same for every character he writes, whether it's Naomi, whether it's Superman, whether it's Lois Lane, whether it's whatever. Just overall, huge disappointment. Bendis is a huge disappointment across the board, with one exception, and that is his Batman. His Walmart Batman is actually one of my favorite of 2019 for DC. Bendis's Walmart Batman, that whole story is actually pretty good. That's actually the best Batman tale of 2019, if you can believe it. So I'll give Bendis his due. He wrote the best Batman story of 2019. It goes to Bendis with the Walmart Batman. He did a good job there. It's got Jonah Hex. It's got Vandal Savage. It's got Green Lantern in it. It's an amazing story. It's really good stuff. It's funny. Dialogue's but it's still a pretty good story. In any event, this was disappointing because the Rogol Zar storyline was never resolved. We still don't know much more about Rogol Zar other than he's a Kryptonian. And Rogol Zar, he's the one that actually destroyed Krypton. But apparently, according to the writing shenanigans of Bendis, the United Planets was formed, and their first act of judgment was to effectively execute Jor-El by sending him back in time before Krypton exploded. And they didn't punish Rogol Zar, but no, they're going to kill Jor-El. And none of the other members of the Circle were prosecuted or even put on trial. And then next thing you know, Superman is revealing his secret identity because of some deep conversation he had with Adam Strange. Oh, God. So terrible. The writing, he doesn't understand the characters. So disappointing. It's such a jarring switch from the Superman that we knew before. Huge disappointment, and that, of course, everything flows from that. The disappointment flows into the Millennium. It flows into the Legion of Superheroes, although I will say that the Legion of Superheroes, I think it's got potential. It's not as bad as I was fearing it was going to be. Legion of Superheroes still has some hope, but there's some dark clouds on the horizon there. If I look at future solicits, Bendis doesn't quite understand what people find fascinating about the 31st century. At least that's what the future solicits suggest to me. But I digress. Superman's a disappointment. All right, coming in at number 6. Most disappointing DC title of 2019 is Young Justice. What can I say about Young Justice? This was another mess. It's Bendis, terrible dialogue. He takes these characters, and every single one of these characters, he doesn't understand, he doesn't know, he's not familiar with their continuity. It's very obvious. He doesn't explain how they ended up even how they ended up meeting each other was absurd. There was they met each other on the street, and there was a traffic accident or some stupid thing, and then all of a sudden they get bound together, and then they find Superboy, and they're all from different timelines. None of the timelines line up continuity-wise, and let's face it, we all know what Bendis' excuse is going to be. Well, it's going to, I don't know, is he going to point to Doomsday Clock and say, well, the metaverse is resetting itself? Is he going to point to the Justice League logic and in the pages of Snyder's Justice League and say, well, the multiverse is healing itself, and the multiverse is always healing itself, and that explains how all these disparate characters suddenly meet up? And the problem is that none of these characters, they're literally hopping from timeline to Earth, from Earth, different Earths. They're hopping up to different Earths. First they were on Gemworld, then for 3 or 4 issues, nonsensical dialogue, inconsistent dialogue. Then they were jumping from Earth to Earth. Then they were on Earth 3. And then they have, unfortunately, they bastardized Earth 3 because now Earth 3 has got their counterparts. They're not likable. They're not friendly. The latest issue here has Naomi just show up. Why did Naomi show up? It's not really clear. She actually shows up, obviously. This is fairly standard stuff. She shows up on the last... Shows up... Actually, no, that was the last issue. She actually does show up in this issue. Long conversation, going nowhere. Just a massive disappointment. This is not going anywhere. I can't summarize this. I can't tell you what the plot points are in this. I don't know why this comic book exists, other than to have a bunch of these characters on here. And by the way, these are teenagers. Young Justice is supposed to be about more children-like characters. They should be younger. And they shouldn't consist of any of these characters except for Impulse and a younger Robin. and it should be Damien and not Timothy. So there's a myriad of things wrong with this title right from the concept to the get-go. Again, huge disappointment. And I don't see any hope for this on the horizon, by the way. Number 5, Wonder Woman. Huge disappointment on this. J. Willow Wilson, by far, probably, she came on to Wonder Woman with much celebration. Completely directionless. I don't know what's... Wonder Woman remains directionless. Wonder Woman, it was... I review Wonder Woman every month that comes out, pretty much. And the entire year was tied up with Wonder Woman... with another character, Atlantiades, a gender-confused, trans something, whatever, goddess who became the new goddess of love, because I guess you can't have a man or a woman be the goddess of love. You got to have a gender-confused person be, gender-fluid person be the goddess of love, because I guess that makes more sense in this woke culture. Anyways, it didn't work. And in any event, this Atlantiades character, which... Atlantiades' character basically sums up the problem with all of J. Willow Wilson's entire run for the entire year, is that she failed to understand that she wrote Atlantiades like a villain. And instead, she made Atlantiades attracted to Wonder Woman, and then sadly made Wonder Woman attracted to Atlantiades, and then to make it even worse, forgot that Atlantiades mind-raped an entire Midwestern American town and somehow thought that there was some sort of redemptive arc for Atlantiades, which there wasn't. Then all of a sudden, Cheetah comes along, or Grail comes along with the God-Killer sword. She loses that. Cheetah takes up the God-Killer swords. We've now spent the last, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 issues with Cheetah. And now then J. Willow Wilson gives up, leaves the title to go to Sandman, or Book of Magic, or whatever it is. And now we got Orlando. Steve Orlando is the writer, and I had hope for him because he did a good Wonder Woman Annual number 3, but unfortunately, he's just doing a terrible job here. I was hoping he was just going to wrap up Willow's storyline immediately and get to something exciting. That doesn't appear to be the case. Wonder Woman is still preachy. She's still boring. She's still fighting Cheetah. Cheetah is trying to rescue Wonder Woman from her gods because Wonder Woman help Cheetah disconnect herself from her Urshkataga god, and so now that's all this is Cheetah fighting Wonder Woman to help, which doesn't make sense continuity-wise. Steve Orlando is another person that doesn't seem to play well with others, doesn't seem to respect the continuity of the mainstream DC universe. The Cheetah is involved with the Legion of Doom. There is no way to reconcile this comic book. Cheetah would not be distracted like that. She's on the Legion of Doom. She should be currently captured by Perpetua, and Apex Lex is feeding off the power of the Cheetah, who has the Tear or Tear of Extinction. Instead, somehow at the same time, she's fighting Wonder Woman with a God-Killer sword and being concerned about something as insignificant as disconnecting Wonder Woman from her gods. Boring stuff, preachy stuff, not moving the character forward. One of my biggest disappointments of 2019. And sadly, I see it getting worse. I don't see it getting better, despite the fact that I had some hope that maybe Steve Orlando would move things forward. That doesn't appear to be the case. And by the way, Silencer, who's on this cover of Wonder Woman 83, Silencer's a great character, but let me tell you something about Silencer. She shouldn't be in this comic book. She's an afterthought, and that's her use in this issue, I think, is insulting. But I will say that Silencer is one of my favorite characters of 2019. And she had one of the best series of 2019, despite the fact that it was canceled. But I'll get to that in another video. All right, so now we're down to the final 4. So, issue 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So number 4, is Catwoman. Joelle Jones, my God, she's an amazing artist. I loved her Lady Killer, but I just can't, I got to stop putting lipstick on the pig at this point. Terrible, terrible, terrible writing on Catwoman. I thought it was going to get better. Unfortunately, the same villain that she had in the opening arc has stayed with Catwoman for 18 issues. Selena is still in Vermosa fighting this I can't even remember the character's name, this ugly sort of vain narcissist character. I've given up already. I just want this to end. I want this to end. Unfortunately, Joelle Jones, you know what she did? She seemed to have taken some writing advice, I think, from Tom King. Tom King, the guy that can never end a story. Took him 85 issues to tell a story that ultimately ended up making no sense whatsoever in Batman. That Tom King. Well, she's now managed to stretch out a character arc for the villain for 18 issues. Change Catwoman's costume, I think, for the sole purpose because she just wanted to draw something different. She's a gorgeous artist. She actually is. She's a beautiful person, and she's a very good artist. She draws gorgeous women. But really, I mean, she did a beautiful design of Catwoman's wedding dress last year. But at the end of the day, you know, this has gone nowhere. This is a comic book that's gone absolutely nowhere. And, you know, there's a nice appearance in this issue of 18 of Zatanna. It just consists of Catwoman and Zatanna not using their powers, just beating up a bunch of guys in a bar. And then, you know, and then basically talking smart to the godmother of Valhamusa or whatever the hell it is again. I forget what. Like I said, I've just lost interest in this title. And every time I pick it up, I keep waiting for something to change. But it's forgettable. It's forgettable. It's got so much potential. Catwoman's sister is back, and nothing's been done with her sister for 18 issues. My God, you're better than this, Joelle. I've read Lady Killer. Show some sign that you take some chances. And you don't have an excuse here. You've had 18 issues. You could have done a lot in 18 issues. But you didn't do much. All right. So now issue 3. Millennium, 1 of 2. God, what? This was oh my God. This was awful. Millennium, 1 of 2. The second one was awful too. This told the story of Rose going through the various timelines of the DC universe to end up in the 30th century. And of course, everyone's talking about, you know, everybody was looking forward to this. I was, because this was going to be the lead-in to the Legion of Superheroes. Legion of Superheroes Millennium. Legion of Superheroes do not appear at any point in this series except the last few pages of issue 2. It involves Rose, this schizophrenic Rose, who ends up going through the various centuries, living throughout all of Earth's disasters, reinforcing into the readers that not only do our present-day heroes fail us, they fail to save humanity, they fail to save the Earth. Earth dies and goes through multiple disasters. The heroes fail every single time. And the only one that survives is Thorn, Rosen Thorn, the schizophrenic psychopath that, I'm sorry, she's just schizophrenic. Did I just say something that insulted the mentally ill? How dare I? Whatever. I don't care about Rosen Thorn. Nobody else does. But Bendis. Bendis is coming. He's not leaving. In any event, this is a terrible story. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't. There was no Legion of Super. This was so disappointing. This was a betrayal of the fans. This was a betrayal. Actually, this is even a betrayal of the Rosenthorn character. If you want to get, straight up about it. And in any event, she ends up in the 31st century. And now, if you can believe it, Rosenthorn is actually the ambassador for the Legion of Superheroes in the future. She's the ambassador of Earth. She's representing the Legion of Superheroes to the Madam President of the United Planets in the 31st century. That's what Rosenthorn is. So she managed to live for 1,000 years, and apparently, despite her psychosis, over 1,000 years living on old Earth through all those disasters, apparently somewhere along the way, she learned diplomacy. We how she learned diplomacy, we don't know. That was never explained. All this experience that Thorne has, she's now become a diplomat in the future for the Legion of Superheroes. Bendis had 2 prestige format issues, or almost not prestige format, but 2 big issues, and doesn't explain any of this. I can't tell you enough how disappointing this is, and how disappointing this is. So disappointing. Shame on you, Bendis. Well, all right, now these last 2. Issue 2, or number 2 for most disappointing DC comic of 2019 is definitely Event Leviathan. Although it's a kind of a tie. Neil Adams' Batman Ra's al Ghul is really, really awful. But at least with Batman Ra's al Ghul, which I put at number 1 for the worst of 2019, it's not over yet, is that Batman Ra's al Ghul is so bad by Neil Adams. Talking about mental illness, I think something is a little off with Neil Adams. And I mean that in the compassion. I don't say that with judgment. I say that with compassion. You know, I said the same thing with my grandma, you know, when she was approaching 96. You start to forget things. You forget, you might forget that stories are supposed to make sense. You know, it's okay. I have compassion. I don't say it with judgment, I say it with compassion, all right? And the fact of the matter is that the guy might be a little off his rocker, Neil Adams, but he can still draw. I mean, the guy's an amazing artist. I mean, he can draw. He's a great artist. What's not to love, you know? He's the old guy at the comic book conventions. I saw him in New York City this year. He's the old guy overcharging $40 for a print that he drew 20 years ago. Unbelievable. But in any event, it is what it is. I didn't buy one, though. Because I don't know. It is what it is. But Event Leviathan, talk about a non-event. I did reviews on each. Event Leviathan, the most underwhelming villain you could possibly imagine. He's such a joke. His master plan is to take over all the intelligence agencies, thinking that somehow if you blow up you blow up an FBI building, somehow that means you've eliminated the FBI. It's so ridiculous. Bendis has put no thought into this whatsoever, and it shows. He's done a horrible job. This is not only the most disappointing event of 2019, it is also the worst event. And there's a difference, because it's not just disappointing. It's disappointing and awful. It's awful. It's badly written. The dialogue is terrible. It doesn't flow well. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't flow well. It's out of continuity in terms of matching up with other comics. The characters all sound the same. They literally stand around. There isn't even a single scene in the entire 6-issue series where I don't even think Batman runs in the entire scene. I think there's a scene in issue 5 where Batman jumps off a building chasing Red Hood. Was that issue 4? But I actually think most of them stand around or sit in a Jeep or a moving vehicle and talk. That's all this series is. A joke. A sad joke. I'm not looking forward to Event Leviathan. I'm not looking forward to the Invisible Mafia or Event Leviathan or anything in Superman for at least the next year. And besides, who cares? I mean, why should we care about Superman? I mean, he doesn't even have a secret identity anymore. So why even bother having the guy around? Might as well have a Clark Kent series. It'd be just as exciting as this, right? In any event, guys, I think I've maybe stated my disappointment with these two. So that basically sums up my disappointment with the 10 issues of 10 comics of DC for 2019. I've gone on here for 27 minutes. This stuff takes a long time, bitching and whining about this stuff. But it is what it is. I wanted to have a good bitch fest and whine fest before I, delved into, some of the more optimistic things in 2019. Why? Because I could. And here we go. Tell me what you think of my top 10 most disappointing. Did I miss anything? Let me know. And follow me on Twitter at Metropolis40. Hit the subscribe button. And until next time, Comic Boom out.